Hello, everybody. This is Anna Johnson with the Center for Rural Affairs, and we're talking about the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program today. But I'm going to wait a minute or so to really get started. So I'm waiting for folks to join. So, and also gives me a minute to get my notes together and make sure I can see where comments are coming in. So, thank you. Okay, so bear with me. I'm new to Facebook Live, so there's always a couple features that I'm missing. But anyway, I'm so glad folks are joining. Thank you. Welcome. We're going to get started in a minute or so. Thank you for your patience, everybody. The beginning of webinars is the best part of the webinar. Okay. Well, we've got a couple folks on. I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you so much for joining. So I'm going to just go ahead and get started. And I believe this is being recorded, so it'll be posted later. So if you missed something or, or want to share with a friend later on, it'll be available. So again, my name's Anna Johnson, and I am a policy manager at the Center for Rural Affairs. And if you're watching this Facebook Live, you probably are already familiar with the Center for Rural Affairs and know about us through our various, online presences, maybe in print media also. But we're a nonprofit organization located with headquarters in eastern Nebraska, and then I work in our central Iowa office, and we advocate for rural communities on several different levels. So I work on farm bill policy and agricultural policy. And maybe you saw the Facebook Live event I did a couple weeks ago on the conservation stewardship program, and maybe you've been logging into our other Facebook Live events. We've had a lot of really awesome staff sharing a lot of really cool stuff. So thank you for logging in today. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to talk about the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program. So you may remember Congress passed the CARES Act in late March, and that included $19 billion to address the impact of the coronavirus on agriculture. And so of that $16 billion with a B, is available for direct payments to farmers who grow or raise eligible commodities. And so I'm going to talk about eligibility and all that jazz in a minute, but just kind of the basic overview of this program. It's called the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program. You may have heard about it. It opened up for farmer applications about 2 weeks ago, and I also mentioned that, so I'm going to be talking about the payments to farmers today, but there's also a $3 billion piece of this program that is, as I understand it, for contracts to deliver food packages to food pantries. So if you have questions about that, follow up with us later. I'll try to give you try to hook you up with some resources. But today we're focusing on the $16 billion that's for farmers. And I'm specifically going to be talking about how to figure out whether your farm is eligible and how to apply. So, and before I dive in, I want to ask you to mark 2 dates on your calendars, 2 important dates. There's the first one is June 22nd. There's an opportunity to submit a comment to USDA to expand this CFAP, the acronym for it, expand the program, and they're requesting input by June 22nd, which is just under 2 weeks away. So if you're interested in or planning to submit comments there or have questions about it, get in touch with us soon, because that's coming right up. And then the second date to mark your calendars with is when the CFAP applications are going to close. These farmer payment applications are going to close, and that's August 28th. So a little bit, more time for that, but want to make sure you have that deadline in your horizon. So, and then also something that USDA has stated in their webinar and publicly. The CFAP program is not a first come, first served program, so the farmers who are planning to apply, we know that in the first 2 weeks of the program, I believe I saw that they paid out about $1 billion of the $16 billion that's available already. So while you can apply up until August 28th, we just generally encourage you to apply early. It's just a good best practice. There's more time to figure out any kind of paperwork that you need to do. So yeah, so apply soon if you're considering it. And so now I'm going to dive into talking more about the program. What is this program that I'm telling you to apply for? So again, we're talking about the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program. You may have seen the acronym CFAP, which again opened for farmer applications about 2 weeks ago. And so the way that this program works is generally USDA has created a list of crops and livestock that are eligible for payments. And so if you raise things on that list, you may be eligible for a payment, if you submit paperwork and fit eligibility criteria. But if you raise or grow anything that's not on the list, then you're not eligible to apply for support for that. But again, we're going to get into how to ask USDA to add additional things to their list. So you can find the full list of eligible commodities. These are crops and livestock on the USDA website, which the link is going into the comments. I want to double check that it's working. So bear with me for a moment while I click around. Hello everyone, thanks for joining. I can see comments. Oh good, okay. Thanks for commenting. Excellent, yes, links. So the link is there. So that's where you can look up all of the eligible commodities. So these include for grain crops, corn and soybeans, for livestock, hogs, cattle, and sheep. With sheep, it's only lambs and yearlings. Dairy is also included, and then also specialty crops, which is a technical term that USDA uses to refer to a really broad umbrella of fruits and vegetables, and also like nuts and mushrooms and like beans and herbs. It encompasses a whole bunch of different things. So of the specialty crops that are eligible, so only specific ones are eligible. And so these include, I pulled out ones that are kind of more likely to be grown in this region. So that's apples, cabbage, carrots, onions, which is both dry and green onions, spinach, sweet potatoes, sweet corn's also on there, but I know that sweet corn's not a January. It's not maybe not. The season might not fit. Beans and mushrooms are also eligible. So be sure to check out their list of what commodities are eligible to look up what you grow and match against their list. And also USDA is making webinars available for producers of specific categories of crops. So just to flag, because I'm talking about specialty crops, their webinar to help farmers who raise specialty crops is today at 2 p.m. Central. There's another one for dairy producers on June 11th, another for grain and livestock producers on June 16th, and I have a link here where you can go and look up those webinars and log in if you have time. But again, if you're raising fruits and vegetables and you want to sit through another webinar today, there's one today at 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern. So I want to flag that if you want to learn more. So that's my overview of the commodities that are eligible. There are some things that are not eligible. So this is alfalfa, forage crops, hay, unless it was cut from one of the eligible grain crops. Sorghum is an eligible grain crop, so if you're making hay from your sorghum, that might be eligible. But my sense is that most of the hay in our region, Nebraska, Iowa, isn't eligible. Other things that aren't eligible are poultry, eggs, and hemp. And that first link that we shared has the full list of more things that are not currently eligible. So once you've clicked through and looked through what USDA has said, what crops and livestock and fiber products that you produce are eligible, then you'll want to look into what kind of payment you might be able to receive. So generally, from what I can see, the payment's going to vary by commodity, but it's paid based on your inventory and production between January and April, and for some commodities for specific weeks between those 2 months, like January 15th to April 15th. So for dairy, that's production, just like production between January and March. For grain, they're looking at the amount of grain you had in inventory in January. For livestock, they're looking at the sales of owned inventory between those two dates, January 15th and April 15th, and your highest inventory between April 16th and May 14th. So, and also, I'm going through this a little fast, but I'll also give you a resource so you can like look at this, in a more official capacity and like reread it too. So for fruits and vegetables, they're looking at what volume you sold between January 15th and April 15th. They're also looking at, for fruits and vegetables, what volume was shipped and not sold in that time period, and also acres that were in production that were not shipped and sold. So I know that a lot of folks that raise fruits and vegetables in our region kind of don't operate on those timelines. They're not. A lot of folks aren't maybe shipping and selling during January and April, between January and April, but I'm going to kind of lay out the parameters. So, and my understanding is like if you raise an eligible commodity, but you didn't have any issues with selling or harvesting it in that time period, then you might not qualify for a payment. So, call your local, we'll go into learning about how to apply and how to dig in more in a minute, but more soon, but just wanted to lay out the parameters of how to figure out if what you grow and raise is eligible. So another thing is that the commodity that you're applying for, it needs to be, the technical term that they're using is subject to price risk, which when I first read that, I kind of got glassy-eyed. So what that means, what they're getting at there is that you had to have something in your inventory or in production, depending on the commodity, and you cannot have already had an agreed upon future price for it. So, so if you had a forward contract or a fixed price contract for some of your crops or livestock, that is not going to be eligible for a payment because you knew what price you were going to be able to sell it for, and the price didn't change in this tough time period. So there's and that first. There's also a FAQ page that USDA has that I don't have the link for right here, but we'll pull it up for you. USDA has a CFAP FAQ page that goes into which kinds of contract are eligible and which aren't. So you can look that up if you have more questions. So then also on this question of how big will your payment be? Is it worth applying? USDA has an online Excel spreadsheet where you can plug in, where you download the spreadsheet and then you plug in your production and your inventory numbers, and it will estimate for you what your the size of your payment. So that's also available at that original first link I shared. There's a lot of information on that page. So, but what you're looking for is something called the CFAP application generator and payment calculator. So I'm looking for their calculator tool. Thanks everybody for. Oh, I love seeing all the comments. Oh, that's great. Okay, so so then another point to note is that the payment is calculated based on a set price that USDA has already selected, and it's not reflective of any kind of like value add or price premium. So if you are raising organic crops and get a higher price for them, generally you're not going to be able to flag that in your application. And the application is just like if it's organic corn, there's just one price for corn, whether it's conventional or organic. So I want to make sure that that's clear. And then also when you're applying, there's also a couple eligibility requirements that are worth touching on. So you have to be a citizen or a resident alien, and in certain cases, foreign persons who are actively engaged on farms are eligible. Partnerships are eligible. Tribes and tribal organizations are eligible. Corporations, LLCs, other business structures are all can all fall into the eligible category to apply. However, if you're applying, you can't have been suspended or debarred or excluded from federal programs. This happens for things like criminal and civil judgments. Relatively few people are going to be impacted by this, and also want to flag that is not triggered by delinquency on any FSA loans or any loan forgiveness. So I just want to say that about eligibility. So kind of our general take on CFAP and like how it's going to work, how it is working, and how it will continue to work. It's a little easier to apply if you produce fewer commodities, and you know, the bigger your production is, the bigger your payment's going to be, obviously. And I also kind of, as I alluded to earlier, a lot of folks selling in kind of local markets, or, you know, on a different seasonal schedule, are working on a different timeline, and so like looking at your January through April like production and inventory records might not really serve the structure of your business. But I really don't want to encourage anyone to just like write it off immediately. I think I want to encourage you to look into it and see if it really applies for your operation, and if you could get a payment. So again, you know, like USDA has $16 billion in this program, and they're making direct payments to farmers between now and August 28th. So wanted to just make sure you had all that information. Okay, and did I skip? I think I skipped something that's like important to flag. Is that? Oh well, it's gone. If it comes back to me, I will tell you. Okay, so then the second kind of chunk of stuff I wanted to talk about is how do you apply for the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, CFAP. So you apply through your USDA Farm Service Agency County office, your FSA office. So for those who are totally new to USDA and working with USDA, one of their branches is the Farm Service Agency, and they have local offices all over the country. In Iowa and Nebraska, there's about one per county. They're called county offices. And so you can look up their, we have a link here for where you can look up your location and contact information for your local FSA office, if you've never worked with them before. And FSA offices, along with a lot of other government offices, are currently closed for in-person visits. So you need to, in order to apply for this program, the CFAP program, you need to call your local FSA office and set up a phone appointment to talk with them. And when you call, if they don't answer, be sure to leave a message with your name and contact information. Obviously, they've got a lot of people interested in this program right now, and the offices usually don't have that many people staffing them. So just, you know, call, leave a message, be patient. So your local FSA folks will work on helping you fill out the required forms in order to apply, you know, either like sending you the forms, or if you have questions, you can take them to them. You probably need to work with it's good to have the first phone conversation, but then there's going to be a fair amount of paperwork involved with this, and that can either be done over email or fax or mail. I believe I saw that you could also, like, if you want to print off the forms and like put them in an envelope and put them in a Dropbox at the office, that's an option for some county offices. And my sense is that the turnaround time for getting your payment once your complete application is submitted can be around 2 weeks. So keep that in mind. And then also for kind of weird administrative reasons that are not interesting to explain, suffice to say that USDA is making these payments out of 2 different bank accounts that they have. One of them is available now, and one of them is going to be available in July. And so they're paying 80% of the payment right now, and then they will follow up with an additional 20% later. So just get ready for kind of that like double payment process. So then also, if you've never worked with your local FSA before, there will be some additional paperwork to get you into their system that they'll ask you to do. So there's a bunch of standard forms that they require for enrolling in any of their programs. And there's a form to establish that your farm is a legal entity. There's a form to, if you farm on highly erodible land or on a wetland, there's a form to certify that you have certain conservation measures in place. And there's a couple other kind of basic pieces, and all of those are online if you want to look them up at that very first link, the CFAP link, if you want to download them. And some of them are in Spanish, which I'll get to in a minute. Another thing to note is that for folks who haven't applied to an FSA program before, many other FSA programs require that you get something called an FSA farm number, which is like an identification number that they use to keep your farm on file. And there's an additional kind of like some additional hoops to jump through. And I believe you need to have like the deed or like proof of control of the land that you're farming on. That process doesn't my understanding is it doesn't take that long, but it is kind of this like additional hoop. And FSA is not currently requiring that you have an FSA number in place at this time in order to submit your CFAP application, which is good. It kind of removes one of those barriers, but we're not sure yet if they're going to later follow up, and for people who successfully applied who didn't have farm numbers, it's possible that they'll come around later and be like, okay, we got to set up your farm number now. So, but you don't need one right now to apply. So I wanted to flag that. Then also in the application process for this coronavirus food assistance program, CFAP, there's also some paperwork involved in, you know, because USDA wants to, if they're going to pay you based on your production and your inventory, they want to know what your production and your inventory were between January and and so they're accepting a wide variety of types of documentation to prove what your production and inventory were. And this ranges from like receipts to like personal diaries. There's just like a really wide range of records that they'll accept. But this is a really important piece to flag for you. You may not need to show all of those records when you are like applying it, you know, at the beginning when you submit your initial application, but you have to keep them on. You have to keep them on file for 3 years after you receive your payment. I believe I read that USDA has plans to randomly like spot check records, possibly later on, and so by applying, you need to just keep your records on file. So just have them and you know, and check the fine print as you're applying. So. You know, it's just, and it's always, of course, it's always good practice to have good records on hand. So, but just don't want anybody to be surprised by that. So, so then the next thing is, what if you're running into issues working with your local FSA office for whatever reason? So we've got a couple of different additional resources that you can lean on. The first is sometimes it's helpful to have a record in writing. You know, I went to my local FSA office and I asked for their support on a program, and we discussed this, and they gave me a decision that I was or was not eligible for it. You can actually get a record of that in writing. It's not something that they'll just voluntarily give you, but what you do is you ask them at the end of your meeting to have a receipt for service. It's called receipt for service is the term. And if you ask for one, they're required to give it to you. So if you are asking for a receipt for service and they don't give it to you, please get in touch with us because that's something that they're required to do. So that can kind of, it's nice to have that kind of record of like, I asked for this thing. This is our discussion. So then another couple support options. And one thing to know is that if you're having trouble getting in touch with your local FSA office, you can reach out to another FSA office in a neighboring county or something. You have to submit your CFAP application through a local FSA office, but not yours. It doesn't have to necessarily be yours. So that's another thing. And then USDA also has a call center set up to offer you help. And there's a phone number that you can call, and we'll put it in the comments if you're having trouble completing your application. And this I believe it's only staffed on weekdays, and I'm not sure of the hours. And I also don't know what their call volume is like, but obviously if you call and you can't reach anybody, obviously just call back. And then one of the last things here is that, you know, obviously I'm giving this presentation in English, but there are a lot of farmers in the US for whom English is not their native language. And so if you work with non-native English speakers who could benefit from this program, there are some resources available to apply in primarily in Spanish. The main forms that are available in non-English are in Spanish. And USDA also has a Spanish real-time translation line available at that same phone number. So it's the same as the hotline. And then, as I mentioned earlier, so most of the forms are available. Yeah, forms are available in Spanish at that on the USDA website. We are also, Center for World Affairs is doing outreach on the coronavirus food assistance program. along with several other of our partners across the country who work with many different farming populations. So if you're working with somebody who could benefit from applying to CFAP but doesn't speak English or Spanish, get in touch with us and we'll see if we can connect you with any additional resources. So that's kind of my overview of how to apply for this program. And then the last thing is, how do we get USDA to add more commodities to this list? So I mentioned earlier the list, I gave a couple examples of the crops and livestock that are eligible for payments, and as well as a couple that are not. And if you grow or raise something that is currently ineligible and you'd like USDA added to their list, you should submit a comment to USDA by, remember that first calendar deadline, June 22nd. And we've got the link to where you can submit those comments. So some notes on that. Say you are raising chestnuts and you think that chestnuts ought to be eligible for a payment. Your comment is going to be strongest if you have some price data on the price of chestnuts and how that changed between January and April this year. And also if you have other farmers who are submitting similar comments saying, like, I also raise chestnuts and I also think it should be eligible. And it's the strongest if you can find farmers in like other regions that can have a similar request. Obviously that's a pretty tall order. So if you're interested in submitting a comment but you're feeling like this is like kind of overwhelming, just get in touch with us and we'll see what we can do to help submitting those comments. And again, the deadline is June 22nd, so coming right up. So then the last thing I want to talk about is we want to be hearing from you. So some of our colleagues who advocate for stronger programs for farmers are really interested in your feedback and farmers' feedback on the CFAP application and other disaster aid that has been made available to farmers. And so there's a link to submit that feedback to them, and it's managed by the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition and Farm Aid. So we've got a link there for you to submit that information, because USDA is not collecting very much information from people who are applying to CFAP, and so this survey is trying to like get more, understand better like who is being served and who isn't, and also be a little bit broader than just CFAP. What other disaster aid might you have applied for? So be sure to check that out and please fill it out if you are inclined. And then the last thing is just a general plug for Center of Rural Affairs. If this has been at all helpful to you, we encourage you to sign up for our newsletter. We have both paper and email options. So just stay in touch with us. And the link to that is post the link there. So does anybody have any questions from any of that? Feel free to drop them in the comments box, and I'll see what I can do to answer them. Oh yes, farmer feedback. There it is in the chat box. Okay. Oh, so many resources. Isn't that great? Don't you love being able to see a bunch of links and a bunch of resources? Okay, well, not seeing any questions coming up. Well, thank you again for logging in and for watching, and I hope this has been helpful. And if you have additional questions, get in touch with us. My email is on our website, annaj@cfra.org. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear from you. So thanks again for joining in. See you later.